Chapter 3. Down the Path of No Return. A few days later, I stood in the parking lot of a small, nondescript brick building. It didn't look fancy, but surely that didn't matter. My heart galloped in my chest like a wild stallion, and I took a deep breath to calm my nerves. As I walked up the sidewalk to the front door, I fully expected lightning to strike me when I touched the door handle. And when it didn't, I pulled the door open. The air inside was much cooler than the summer heat outside, and a shiver shimmied down my spine as the air conditioning chilled me. "Can I help you?" To my right, a girl with short blonde hair and an ear full of piercings sat behind a desk. Yeah, I'm Sandra Baker. I have an appointment." As I crossed to the desk, my throat constricted and ice coursed through my veins. I shivered again and swallowed the bout of nausea that clawed up my throat and threatened to choke me. "Okay, here's your paperwork. Have a seat and we'll call you back in a minute." The girl handed over a clipboard and some forms, and I took them to a nearby chair and sat down. As I picked up the pen, my hand began to shake. Closing my eyes, I took a deep breath. "It'll be okay. It'll be okay." The mantra played over and over in my head, though it did nothing to stop the freight train roaring in my heart. Somehow I managed to force the pen down and write information on the form. I had no idea if it was correct or not. A door opened and my eyes flicked up. A hardened woman with steely gray eyes and a clipboard met my glance. "Sandra Baker." The lump in my airway grew, and I swallowed it down and nodded. My legs shook as I pushed up from the chair and stumbled in her direction. The weight of anchors pulled on them. Were they even part of my body? A screaming erupted in my head, urging me to flee, and I froze. My eyes tore about the room, but there was no one screaming. What am I doing? I turned to flee, but then I remembered Peter's ultimatum and the fact that I couldn't raise this baby alone. It's for the best. The mantra started again and propelled me to the waiting woman. Up close, she was even more harsh-looking. Ice for eyes, no smile, a don't mess with me aura, hair pulled back in a tight brown bun. Executing a nearly perfect three-point turn, the nurse spun as soon as I reached her and marched into the back. Shoulders down, I followed, even as a small voice pounded in my head to turn around. The nurse turned into a tiny room with a bed, a stool, a hard plastic chair, and a tray with instruments. "Undress from the waist down and put this on," the nurse said, as she picked up a gown off the tray. She shoved it unceremoniously into my arms and left the room. The cold sterility of the room tightened the fear of my heart, but somehow I managed to pull off my clothes and fold them on the chair. I slid on the paper-thin gown, wrapping it around my body. I shouldn't be here. I thought about bolting, but what good would it do? Instead, I climbed up on the bed, the paper crinkling beneath me. Surely something in the room would calm my nerves. I glanced around, but there was nothing on the stark white walls, not one picture. No beaches, no calming words, just a harsh white. Why did the walls present nothing calming? Surely other women felt the same anxiety. A knock at the door arrested my attention and I jumped. An older man with bushy white eyebrows and a wrinkled forehead entered, along with the hardened nurse. I waited for a comforting word, but none came. "Lay back," the nurse pointed. I acquiesced and focused on the white tiled ceiling. No comfort there either. "Legs up!" I positioned my legs in the cold metal stirrups and shivered again. "Am I going to be awake?" I asked, as the fear squeezed ever harder. "Yes, did you think we would put you out?" A sharp stare from the icy eyes. That was exactly what I had expected. I didn't want to be awake for this. If I got up to leave now, would they let me? A sharp sting caused me to suck in my breath. "That was a local anesthetic. It will help." A weight like a stone rolled on my chest, and it grew hard to take a breath. I squeezed my eyes shut, but that only intensified the sound of the clanking metal instruments. I opened them and began counting the holes in the tiles. 1, 2, 3. Ouch! Tears filled my eyes as the pain intensified. Why had no one warned me about the pain? "Hold still." A cold hand held my legs apart, and the freezing sensation crawled up my leg. Then the scraping started. I bit back the screams, though moans escaped, and tears flowed freely down my cheeks now. Scrape, tug, scrape, tears, moans, scrape, tug. My hands clutched the side of the bed. The scraping stopped, and I sighed with relief. Surely this was almost over. Then the whirring started, and my heart stopped. More suction, more tears, and still no comfort. The sound stretched to eternity. The pain never ceased. And then it was silent. "You can get dressed now," the woman said, and they left the room. The doctor had never spoken. I didn't even know his name. How different from all the doctors I worked with, who always introduced themselves. I tried to sit up, but my body fought me. The feeling of being punched repeatedly in the abdomen kept me prone. Then the guilt crept in. What had I done? A moan that didn't even sound human reached my ears. Was that me? And then a baby's cry echoed throughout the room. My eyes darted about, but I was still alone. The cold returned and hungrily licked up my body. Crossing my arms, I hugged my shoulders, wishing I had never entered this vile place. After some time, I managed to force my body into a sitting position. My head pounded like a drum, and my stomach ached, as though I'd lost a terrible boxing match. Nausea bubbled in my belly as I stood, and I clasped a hand to my mouth to keep the contents in. My shaky legs could barely hold my weight as I struggled to calm my quivering hands and redress myself. The nurse re-entered just as I finished. "Come with me." She pivoted and marched out the door. I followed, pulling my shirt close around my neck. The feeling of being naked and exposed lay on my shoulders like a coat. Would everyone know what I had done? Would it flame on my chest like a scarlet letter? I suddenly knew exactly how Hester Prynne must have felt in the novel I was forced to read in high school. The nurse opened a door on the left. "Take a seat. You have to wait at least an hour before we can release you." I nodded and entered the room. The door clicked closed. Nothing but hard plastic chairs and 3 other women filled the room. One woman nonchalantly read a book, but the other 2 mirrored my feelings. One girl, probably in her teens, sat rocking with her knees at her chest. Her dark hair covered some of her face, but her vacant brown eyes stared at nothing. The other woman, a young Hispanic who appeared about my age, sniffled softly into a tissue. Tears streaked her face. I sat down in the chair one away from her, but the girl did not even glance at me. Her brown eyes also focused on nothing. As I studied my brown hands clasped together, the questions barraged me again. Why did I let Peter talk me into this? Will this massive guilt ever go away? Will the child ever forgive me? The cry of the baby came again, and my head popped up. I glanced from one woman to the next, but they appeared to hear nothing. Was I going crazy then? The cry grew louder, and my body began to shake uncontrollably. I must be going mad. I jammed my fingers in my ears to block the sound, but the cry echoed in my head. Nothing seemed to stop the sound. My hands found the side of my head and squeezed. Black dots swam before my eyes, but finally the noise grew silent. The nurse came in, and the woman with her book exited. How could she be so calm? Had she not had the same procedure? Why had no one told me about this guilt? Was it not normal to feel so much guilt? Or the pain? The pain in my stomach, but also in my heart. Pain I had never felt before. Emptiness. The blonde girl went next, but she had to be carried from the room by 2 nurses. She never once looked at anything. Her wild eyes remained vacant. I wanted to talk to the Hispanic girl, but how do you strike up a conversation after you've done the unthinkable? Then the Hispanic girl left, shuffling as a zombie after the nurse, and I was alone. Why had Peter not come with me? He said he'd been too busy, but he should have been here. This was his idea. He'd given me the money like a prostitute and sent me to do the dirty deed myself, and I hated him for it. The silence in the room pressed in on me, and I swallowed. The room began to spin, and my breath, I couldn't get a full breath. Nothing but shallow gasps. I tried again, clawing at my throat. What was happening to me? My eyes grew wide as I struggled, but the darkness won. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the small room. I blinked a few times, taking in the cream-colored walls before realizing I was home in my own bed, in a pair of pajamas. How had I gotten home? I pushed back the covers and sat up, but immediately the room spun. Slamming my hands to the side of my head, I waited for the room to stop turning. When it finally stilled, I pushed myself off the bed. As soon as my feet touched the floor, I nearly crumpled from the pain. A burning sensation blazed through my abdomen, and I wrapped one arm around my stomach. The other grasped the wall, and slowly I limped down the hallway and into the living room. Peter sat on the couch watching TV. He glanced up as I entered. "Hey, how are you feeling?" he asked, before returning his eyes to the black box. My eyes narrowed, and I glared at him as hatred fueled in my heart. I bit back the hateful words I wanted to spew and took a breath. How did I get here? Evidently you passed out and they called me. We still need to go back and get your car. No. I shook my head as the nausea reared up again. I never want to see that place again, so find someone else to drive it home, or they can have it towed and I'll pick it up from the tow place. Peter wrinkled his forehead. Don't be silly. It's just a few minutes down the road. We'll get it when you feel better. If I ever feel better, I whispered, as the grief pulled at my heart and the tears tumbled down my cheeks again. Peter rose from the couch to comfort me, but his touch only ignited the nausea and repulsed me. I shook him off and limped back to the bedroom, shut the door, and crawled back into bed. Pulling the covers over my head, I closed my eyes, wishing I could redo today and make a different decision. At some point, Peter came in to offer me dinner, but I couldn't eat. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't sure I'd ever be hungry again. He didn't come back that night, and I was glad. The mere sight of him stirred the seed of hatred, and the thought of his body next to mine made me cringe. The cry of a baby woke me sometime later, and I glanced around. A tiny baby in a blue sleep suit lay at the foot of my bed, crying softly and flailing little arms. Was it a boy then? I reached for the baby, but my arms continually fell short. The cries grew softer and softer, and my heart squeezed tighter and tighter, and then they stopped, and the baby regarded me with empty, dark eyes. A guttural scream reached my ears, and I snapped my eyes shut and clapped my hand over my mouth. Drenched in sweat and tears, I slowly opened my eyes. But there was no longer any baby. There was no baby. I had killed him. I curled into a ball as racking sobs wrenched my body. When there were no tears left, I touched my stomach, and the pure emptiness consumed me again. I had killed my own flesh and blood. For what? Convenience? I couldn't go on like this, and I couldn't get back to sleep. How could I deaden the pain? The image of the small stash of liquor Peter kept for parties jumped in my mind, and I limped my way into the kitchen. He was snoring softly on the couch as I passed, and the hateful thoughts that jumped in my mind surprised me. I shook my head and continued limping along. A few more steps landed me at the little chest. Opening the door, I took stock of the offerings. I had never been a big drinker, so I had no idea what I was looking at or what each tasted like. Rum, tequila, gin, whiskey, scotch. I played a quick mental game of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and grabbed a bottle, closing the door softly and shuffling back to the room. As I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the bottle, I wondered if it would help. Unscrewing the lid, I lifted the clear liquor to my mouth, took a deep breath, and swallowed. Fire burned my throat as the liquid slid down and my eyes watered. I coughed and slapped my hand over my mouth. Had I woken Peter? I held my breath and listened, but no sound came back. I swallowed the fire completely and then tilted the bottle up and downed another large gulp. When the bottle was half gone, the glorious numbness set in. I screwed the lid back on and placed the bottle in my nightstand drawer, covering it with pajama shirts. I crawled back in the bed, closed my eyes, and let the spinning room rock me to sleep. It was late when I woke up the next day. The apartment was quiet, and though I wasn't really hungry, the alcohol, mixed with the lack of food, created an unpleasant sensation in my stomach. I pushed myself up, grimacing at the amount of pain still coursing through my body, and repeated the previous night's limping expedition to the kitchen. Nothing appealed to me, so I settled on a bowl of cereal. It was easy, and hopefully it would soothe the swirling sensation in my stomach. The walk to the living room was even slower, as the hand holding my abdomen now had to hold the bowl of cereal. But finally I made it. I sank onto the brown leather couch and clicked on the television. Pictures flashed, but I saw none of them. The sound, however, was better than the silence. The silence scared me, as the cries of a baby seemed to come in the silence. As today was Saturday, there was no need to go to work. Peter must have gone in, though, which was fine by me. I still didn't want to see him. When the cereal was gone, the sensation in my stomach waned, but as it did, the pain in my heart returned, along with the need for a drink. I limped the bowl to the sink and then back to the bedroom where I rescued the bottle and downed another fourth. It was nearly empty. I had no idea how often Peter checked the stash, or if he'd even know if a bottle was missing, but I decided I better replace it and get some more. I shrugged on a cardigan, not bothering to brush my teeth or my hair. I didn't care what anyone thought about me, as long as they didn't know my secret. Clutching the cardigan high around my neck, I grabbed my wallet and limped out of the apartment. A liquor store sat a few blocks up, and I thought I could make it. But about halfway there, the pain blossomed in my stomach. The sun beat down, causing beads of sweat to pop out on my forehead. If anyone peered out their window, they would probably wonder why I was wearing a cardigan in the summer heat. But I didn't care. The layers helped me hide. By the time I reached the store, sweat was pouring down my face and I couldn't stand up straight. A small bell announced my entrance, and the clerk, an older man in a short-sleeved t-shirt, raised his eyebrows as I entered. Avoiding his gaze, I dropped my head and pulled the sweater closer. Because I had no idea what I was looking for, I just grabbed the first few clear liquors I saw and carried them to the front. "Are you having a party?" the man asked kindly, scanning the bottles. I chanced a quick glance at him and then returned my attention to my wallet. "Something like that," I said, as I fumbled with the zipper. Forking over the money, I picked up the brown paper bag and tucked it under my arm. The bell jingled again as I exited, and taking a deep breath, I began the trek back toward the apartment. By now, my stomach was screaming at me, but I kept pressing on, until the cry of a baby stopped me short. I closed my eyes briefly before looking around, expecting to see nothing like the last few times the phantom cry had come. But this time there was a young mother playing with a small child in her front yard. Somehow that hurt even worse, as the reminder of what I had done to my own child seared my heart again. Gritting my teeth against the pain raging in my abdomen, and now my heart, I quickened my pace to escape the accusing cry. My vision blurred as tears built up behind my eyes, but I blinked them away until I reached my front door. Then they came back with a vengeance, causing me to fumble with my keys at the front door. "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" A glance to my right revealed a man with dark, tan skin watching me. I sniffed. "No, I'm fine. It's just allergies," and jammed the key in the lock again. This time it clicked into place and opened the lock. "See? But thank you." I shuffled inside as quickly as I could and closed the door, leaning against it as the tears overwhelmed me. I let them come, pouring down one after the other. I couldn't have stopped them anyway. I was like a leaky faucet. When they finally tapered, I dropped my keys on the entry table and wiped my eyes with the free hand. The aching pain was so bad that all I wanted was a drink and to curl up in bed. But I had to make it there first. I tucked the bag close to my stomach so I could hold the contents and my abdomen, and I limped to the bedroom. Pushing the door open, my eyes tore around in search of a hiding place. Peter was such a minimalist that the bed, dresser, and nightstands were the only furniture in the room. I could hide one bottle in the nightstand, as the one residing there currently was nearly empty. But where to place the others? I quietly cursed my neatness, as there were no piles to hide them under or behind, and shuffled to my side of the bed. As I pulled open the nightstand drawer, I realized I could probably fit 2 bottles there, so I plucked one from the bag and placed it next to its friend. Then I sank to the floor and peered under the bed. Only our slippers were there, but maybe if I put the other 2 close to the wall and my slippers in front, they wouldn't be easily seen. I pulled them out of the paper sack and situated them against the wall. A key in the front door grabbed my attention, and I shoved the bag next to the bottles. I'd have to retrieve it later. Stripping off my cardigan, I tossed it under as well, and then I crawled into bed, pulling the covers up over my ears. Peter's steps came down the hallway, and I wished I'd had time to sneak another drink. I couldn't talk to him right now. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping he'd either think I was asleep or I needed more space. "Sandra?" Hesitation colored his voice, but it didn't ease my hatred of him. "Sandra, I'm really sorry you aren't feeling well. Liam and I went and got your car, so it's back in the parking lot for when you have to go to work on Monday." I held my breath. Surely, if I was quiet, he would go away. He sighed. "Okay, I'll leave, but I'm going to make lunch and I hope you'll join me." His footsteps receded and I sighed. Would I ever be able to forgive him? More importantly, would I ever be able to forgive myself? Saturday turned to Sunday, and I stayed holed up in the bedroom as much as possible. When I heard the front door close and knew Peter was gone, I would venture out to get a small bite of food. It still held no taste, but the sensation of being hungry was slowly creeping back in, and my stomach would grumble in complaint. To Peter's credit, he hadn't bothered me again, and was either sleeping on the couch or somewhere else. I didn't care, as long as it wasn't with me in the bed. The first bottle of liquor was gone, and only half of the second one remained. I hoped I wouldn't have to make another trip to the corner store, but the liquor seemed to be the only thing getting me out of bed in the morning and asleep at night.